"You're wasting my time," Marcus said flatly, not even looking up from his phone. "No offense, but what could someone in a wheelchair possibly teach me about sprinting?" She didn't flinch. She didn't look away. Iser Calloway simply folded her hands in her lap, tilted her head slightly, and said, in the quietest, most certain voice he had ever heard, "More than you think." Marcus Holt had once been called the most promising sprinter in the country. Sports magazines had printed his face on their covers. Coaches had whispered his name like a prayer. And then, at 31, a torn ligament and a botched surgery had taken everything. 2 years of trying to come back. 2 years of failure. And now at 33, he sat in a rehabilitation center in Portland, Oregon, bitter, humiliated, and desperate enough to accept the only tutor the program offered him. A 26-year-old woman in a wheelchair named Iser Calloway. She had kind eyes. That was the first thing people noticed. Deep brown, steady, patient, the kind of eyes that made you feel like she had already forgiven you for something you hadn't even done yet. She arrived that first morning with a notebook, a stopwatch, and a thermos of green tea. She wore a faded Oregon State hoodie and no makeup, and she smiled at Marcus the way you smile at someone you already believe in, even when they don't believe in themselves. He was rude to her for the first 2 weeks. He missed sessions. He gave single-word answers. Once, he told her bluntly that he didn't need a coach who couldn't stand up. She absorbed every ounce of that cruelty without breaking. She simply came back the next morning, thermos in hand, notebook open, stopwatch ready, as if his anger was just weather, something to wait out, not something to fight. It was in the 3rd week that something shifted. Marcus came in early one morning, frustrated after a bad night, and found Iser already there, alone in the gym, her wheelchair parked beside the track. She was watching a video on her laptop, game footage, old competition recordings of Marcus from before his injury. She had paused on a frame where he was mid-stride, every muscle in perfect alignment, expression utterly focused. "What are you doing?" he asked, softer than usual. She looked up without embarrassment. "Studying where you were strongest, so I can help you find that place again." He sat down on the bench beside her, without saying anything. She pressed play. They watched in silence for a long time. That morning was the beginning of something neither of them had planned. Iser had a gift that no one fully understood. She could read movement the way some people read poetry. She had studied biomechanics, sports psychology, and kinesiology with a kind of obsessive devotion that came from somewhere personal and deep. She saw Marcus's stride not as broken, but as altered. She saw compensation patterns that his previous coaches had missed. She built him a recovery program that worked not around his injury, but through his psychology, because she understood, somehow, that his body wasn't the only thing that had been wounded. Over months, Marcus changed, slowly, painfully, honestly. He started coming early, then staying late. He began asking her questions not just about technique, but about everything, about her life, her story, what had put her in that wheelchair. She told him simply, without drama, that she'd had a spinal condition since she was 19, that it had taken the athletic career she had also dreamed of, and that she had spent 3 years being angry before deciding to become something else instead. "What made you stop being angry?" he asked one afternoon. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Someone was kind to me when I gave them every reason not to be. A professor who kept showing up even when I told him I didn't want help." She paused. "I figured if he could do that for me, I could do it for someone else." Marcus looked away. He understood, without needing to say it, that she was talking about him too. What Marcus did not know, what no one at the rehabilitation center knew, was the full shape of Iser Calloway's life outside that gym. She had not mentioned that she held 3 patents in adaptive sports technology. She had not mentioned that a company she had quietly built over 4 years, Callaway Motion Systems, had recently been acquired by a major athletic performance firm for a sum that made headlines in business circles. She had not mentioned that universities sent her consulting requests, that national Paralympic committees sought her advice, or that her research had shaped the training protocols of multiple Olympic programs. She lived modestly. She drove a used van with adaptive controls. She ate the same lunch every day at the same corner table in the rehab center's cafeteria. She had never mentioned any of it, because none of it was why she came to work every morning. Marcus found out on the day of his first official comeback race, a regional qualifier, modest by professional standards, but enormous to him, when a journalist recognized Azer in the crowd and nearly dropped his recorder. The story ran that evening. The quiet woman in the wheelchair who had trained Marcus Holt was not simply a tutor. She was one of the most influential minds in modern sports performance. Her hidden empire, as the article called it, had shaped how elite athletes trained across 3 continents. When Marcus found her after the race, he had qualified, just barely, beautifully. He was shaking. "You never told me," he said. His voice was low and unsteady. She looked at him calmly. "You didn't need to know. You needed to believe in yourself. That's all I ever gave you, a reason to believe." "But why? Why would someone like you spend months on someone like me?" Azer was quiet for a moment. The stadium lights were dimming around them. Someone was folding up chairs nearby. The evening air was cool and still. "Because someone once did it for me," she said softly, "and it changed everything." He stood there for a long moment, unable to speak. At the national championships 14 months later, Marcus Holt crossed the finish line first. The gold medal felt lighter than he expected. He looked up into the stands, the way you look for someone when joy becomes too large to hold alone, and found Azer in the front row, notebook in her lap, stopwatch in her hand, green tea on the armrest beside her. She was not cheering loudly. She was just watching him with those quiet, certain eyes, already believing. He came to her afterward. He knelt down so they were at the same level. He held the medal out toward her. "This is yours," he said. She shook her head gently. "No, that belongs to the man who kept showing up even when he wanted to quit." She held it for just a moment, feeling the weight of it, and then placed it carefully back around his neck. "Go call your family," she said. "They've been waiting a long time for this." He stood. He laughed, a real laugh, warm and full and surprised by itself. "Thank you, Azer. Thank you for letting me," she said. The moral lives quietly in that exchange. It does not announce itself. It simply sits there, the way all true things do, in the space between someone's pain and someone else's choice to show up anyway. Kindness is not always loud. Sometimes it arrives in a faded hoodie with a thermos of green tea, patient enough to wait out your worst days, steady enough to believe in you before you believe in yourself. And when it finds you, it asks for nothing back, except that you pass it forward. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, subscribe, and comment. Let's spread more stories of kindness and hope together.